Montana Territory, 1873. The sky hung wide and impossibly blue above the town of Pine Ridge, a settlement balanced precariously between civilization and wilderness, where the Rocky Mountains stood sentinel over dreams both fulfilled and broken. The townsfolk had long since categorized 25-year-old Colton Lawson as a man married to the open range, just as they had labeled 22-year-old Zara Kincaid, widowed these past 2 years, as a woman who would carry her grief to the grave rather than risk her heart again. Too stubborn to wed, they whispered about both, shaking their heads whenever Colton rode through town, hat pulled low, acknowledging greetings with nothing more than a curt nod before disappearing again to the vast ranch he worked alone. The same words followed Zara as she tended her small mercantile, her golden hair always neatly pinned, her blue calico dresses pristine, her smile polite but never reaching her emerald eyes. Colton believed that a man who tied himself to anything but land and cattle was asking for the kind of pain that couldn't be fixed with whiskey or distance. He had watched his father wither away after his mother's death from frontier fever, had seen too many men lose themselves to grief when wives and children succumbed to the harsh realities of Western life. The frontier was a place for survival, not sentiment. Love was a luxury the West couldn't afford, and he had convinced himself he was better off for recognizing that truth. His ranch, the Broken Arrow, was his sole focus. 10,000 acres of prime grazing land he'd acquired through 5 years of backbreaking work after returning from the war. Each morning he woke before dawn, each night he fell asleep planning the next day's labor. The Broken Arrow didn't care about his past, didn't ask for promises he couldn't keep, didn't leave him when winter came harsh or summer scorched the earth. It was honest in a way people never were. Colton had spent the day moving his cattle to safety, returning to find his ranch house threatened by the advancing flames. Working alone, he frantically dug fire breaks, his muscles burning, his lungs filling with smoke. When a burning branch fell across his back, igniting his shirt, he had barely managed to roll the flames out before unconsciousness claimed him. He awoke to the sound of a woman's voice and the cool touch of wet cloth against his scorched skin. "Stay still, Mr. Lawson. You have burns that need tending." Blinking through the haze of pain, Colton found himself looking into Zara Kincaid's worried face. Her golden hair had fallen from its usual neat arrangement, framing features he had never bothered to notice were beautiful. "My cattle," he started, trying to rise, "are safe," she assured him, pressing him gently back. "Sheriff Rogers sent men to check. The fire turned north before reaching your main herd. Now please, lie still before you undo what little good I've managed." "Why are you here?" he asked, confusion overriding his usual taciturn manner. Zara's hands hesitated momentarily as she wrung out another cloth. "I was delivering medical supplies to the outlying homes when I saw the smoke from your direction. Everyone else was fighting the fire in town." What she didn't say was how her heart had nearly stopped at the sight of his still form beside the smoldering fire break. How she had dragged his considerably larger frame to safety with strength she hadn't known she possessed. How she had torn her petticoat into strips for bandages without a second thought. "I could have managed," he muttered, the lie transparent to them both. "Of course you could have," she replied, a hint of unexpected sharpness in her tone, "just as you could have asked for help before nearly burning to death." Their eyes met, a challenge passing between them that neither fully understood. Something fundamental had shifted, their carefully maintained isolation breached by circumstance neither could have anticipated. For 3 days, Zara returned to tend his burns, bringing supplies from her store and news from town. For 3 days, Colton found himself looking forward to her arrival, watching the way sunlight caught in her hair, noticing how her hands, though delicate, moved with confident purpose. On the 4th day, when she arrived to find him standing on the porch despite her strict instructions to rest, something in Zara's carefully constructed composure cracked. "You are without doubt the most stubborn man I have ever encountered," she declared, setting down her basket with enough force to rattle the bottles inside. "And you," he replied, the ghost of a smile touching lips unused to the expression, "are interfering where you have no business. Your back is burned raw. Someone has to make sure infection doesn't set in." "Why you?" the question hung between them, honest in a way their interactions had not been. Zara looked away, her gaze traveling across the fire-scarred landscape to where new green already pushed through blackened earth. Because no one should face pain alone, she finally said, her voice so soft he had to lean forward to hear it. I know what that's like. The admission, simple as it was, carved through years of Colton's carefully constructed defenses. He saw in her not just the widow shopkeeper the town respected, but a woman who understood loss as intimately as he did. I appreciate the help, he conceded, but I need to check the south pasture. The cattle. We'll wait another day, she interrupted, her tone brooking no argument. Unless you want those burns to scar so badly you'll never be able to wear a proper shirt again. Their gazes locked, neither willing to back down, until unexpectedly Colton laughed, a rusty sound as if long unused. Has anyone ever won an argument with you, Mrs. Kincaid? My husband tried for 8 months, she replied, and then her eyes widened at her own words, the casual mention of Michael something she never allowed herself. And how did that work out for him? Colton asked gently, recognizing the significance of what she had shared. A smile, genuine and unguarded, transformed her face. About as well as it's working for you. The south pasture waited another day. What began as reluctant gratitude evolved into something neither had anticipated. Colton found reasons to visit the mercantile, supplies needed, orders to place, questions about liniment for his healing burns. Zara discovered inventory that required personal delivery to the Broken Arrow, special coffee from San Francisco, books she thought might interest him during evening hours, seeds for the kitchen garden he mentioned starting. The town noticed. Whispers followed them both, speculation rampant about the unlikely pair. Colton, who had never cared what others thought, found himself bristling at the gossip that reached his ears. Zara, whose reputation had been carefully guarded, felt her cheeks flush when customers gave knowing looks as she packed orders for the Broken Arrow. People talk too much in this town, he grumbled one afternoon as he loaded supplies into his wagon outside her store. People always talk, she replied, checking items against her list. It means nothing. Doesn't it bother you what they're saying? Zara paused, her pencil hovering above the paper. They said I would wither away in mourning when Michael died. They said I couldn't run the mercantile alone. They've been wrong before. Colton studied her, admiring the quiet strength she carried so effortlessly. They said I would drink myself to death after I came back from the war, he offered, sharing a piece of himself he'd never spoken aloud. Said a man with my kind of demons couldn't build something lasting. And yet here you stand, she observed, with the finest ranch in 3 counties. And you with the most successful store in town. Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. They were both survivors who had defied expectations, both had built something from nothing through sheer determination. Both had learned to live with ghosts. Their tentative friendship deepened through summer as Colton helped Zara repair her storefront and Zara taught Colton to read the classics she loved. Evening conversations on her back porch stretched longer as nights cooled toward autumn. They shared stories of their pasts, his time fighting in the war, her childhood in Boston, the dreams that had brought them west. What neither admitted was how these moments had become essential, how the prospect of returning to their solitary existences grew more unbearable with each sunset they shared. Their careful independence, once a point of pride for both, now felt increasingly like an unnecessary burden. The harvest festival in September marked a turning point. The entire county gathered in Pine Ridge for dancing, food, and celebration of another year's bounty. Colton, who had avoided such gatherings for years, found himself standing at the edge of the dance floor, watching Zara laugh with friends, her golden hair adorned with autumn flowers, her emerald dress bringing out the color of her eyes. Ask her to dance, urged Sheriff Rogers, appearing beside him, before someone else does. We're just friends, Colton replied automatically, even as his stomach knotted at the sight of Jonathan Wells, the banker, approaching Zara with clear intent. Then you're both bigger fools than I thought, the sheriff remarked, walking away with a knowing smile. Colton watched as Zara politely declined Wells' invitation, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found his. The smile that lit her face made a decision for him that his mind hadn't yet reached. He crossed the floor with purpose, conscious of curious gazes following his progress. Would you dance with me? He asked, extending his hand, aware that this simple gesture would confirm every rumor circulating through town. Zara hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. I thought you didn't dance. I didn't, he acknowledged as he led her to the floor, but some things change. They moved together as if they had danced 100 times before, his hand at her waist, hers on his shoulder, their steps finding a natural rhythm. Around them, conversation dimmed as townsfolk watched in astonishment. Everyone is staring, she murmured, though she made no move to increase the proper distance between them. Let them, he replied, surprising himself with the realization that he meant it. For the first time in years, what others thought mattered less than the woman in his arms. As the music ended, neither immediately stepped away. Something hung in the air between them, unspoken but growing more insistent with each shared breath. It was Zara who finally broke the spell, her cheeks flushed as she stepped back. "Thank you for the dance, Mr. Lawson." "Colton," he corrected. "After all this time, I think you might call me Colton." Her smile was worth every raised eyebrow in the room. "Colton," she agreed, "and I'm Zara." They might have continued in this careful dance of friendship, edging toward something more had fate not intervened. The following week brought news that changed everything. Thomas Garrett, the land speculator who had been buying properties throughout the territory, had acquired the note on Zara's mercantile from the bank in Helena. "He's raising the terms," she told Colton, her hands trembling as she showed him the letter. "Triple what I've been paying, due in full by Christmas. He knows I can't possibly meet these terms." "Why would he do this?" Colton asked, anger rising at the calculated cruelty of it. "Because I refused his offer to buy the mercantile outright," Zara explained. "He wants to consolidate all the businesses on Main Street, create some kind of grand emporium with himself as owner." "There must be something we can do," Colton insisted, already calculating his own resources, wondering if he could sell enough cattle to cover her debt. "There's nothing to be done," she replied, the resignation in her voice cutting him more deeply than he expected. "I've built everything I have around the store. Without it," she let the sentence hang unfinished. That night, Colton rode back to the Broken Arrow with a storm of emotions he couldn't name. The thought of Zara being forced from her business, from Pine Ridge, from him, created a hollow ache he hadn't felt since watching his father fade away after his mother's death. The very thing he had spent years avoiding, caring too much, had happened despite his best efforts. Meanwhile, Zara sat alone in her kitchen, the lamp burning low as she faced the truth she had been avoiding. Somewhere between tending Colton's burns and dancing in his arms, she had done the one thing she had sworn never to do again. She had given her heart to a man whose life was as precarious as any in the West. The pain of potentially losing her business paled, compared to the realization that she would have to leave Pine Ridge, leave him. What neither knew was that Thomas Garrett had more than the mercantile in his sights. The following day, as Colton inspected a broken fence line, he was approached by Garrett himself, flanked by two men whose hands rested too casually near their guns. "Lawson," Garrett greeted him, all false joviality. "I've come to discuss business." "I have no business with you," Colton replied coldly, noting the positions of the armed men. "But you will," Garrett continued, undeterred. "I'm buying up properties all through this valley. Your Broken Arrow sits right in the middle of what will soon be the territory's largest cattle operation. Mine." "The Broken Arrow isn't for sale," Colton stated flatly. "Not now, not ever." Garrett's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Everything has a price, Lawson. The widow Kincaid is learning that lesson as we speak. You will too." "Leave Mrs. Kincaid out of this," Colton warned, his hand instinctively moving toward his own sidearm. "Interesting," Garrett observed. "I'd heard rumors, but I didn't believe the great lone wolf Colton Lawson had developed a tender spot for the widow. Makes me wonder what else you might be willing to give up for her sake." The threat hung in the air, explicit in its implication. Colton's jaw tightened as he recognized the trap closing around them both. "Say what you came to say and get off my land." "Simple terms," Garrett said, dropping all pretense of friendliness. "Sell me the Broken Arrow for half what it's worth, or I'll make sure the widow loses everything, her store, her home, her reputation. It would be a shame if people learned she'd been entertaining a man alone all these months. This town can be so judgmental." Fury rose in Colton's chest, but he kept his expression neutral. "You're overplaying your hand, Garrett. Nobody in Pine Ridge would believe such lies about Mrs. Kincaid." "Perhaps, perhaps not. But the damage would be done, wouldn't it? And while she's fighting those battles, I'll be foreclosing on her property. Your choice, Lawson, your ranch or her future." After Garrett and his men rode away, Colton remained motionless, the implications of the threat unfolding in his mind. He had built the broken arrow from nothing, poured every drop of sweat and blood he had into this land. It was everything he had, everything he was. And yet, the thought of Zara losing her livelihood, her place in the community, cut deeper than he had thought possible. The very attachment he had avoided all these years had become a weapon to be used against him, against them both. The irony was not lost on him. His father's words echoed in his memory. "The more you love, boy, the more you stand to lose." When Colton rode into town the next morning, his decision made, he found Zara outside her store, nailing up a notice announcing a liquidation sale. The sight of her there, stubbornly fighting to the last, cemented his resolve. "We need to talk," he said without preamble, dismounting and tying his horse to the hitching post. "If you've come to offer charity, save your breath," she replied, not pausing in her task. "I've had 6 offers of help since sunrise, all from men who think my situation makes me desperate enough to consider marriage as a business arrangement." Colton winced at her words, suddenly aware of how his own plan might sound. "That's not why I'm here." She turned to face him, hammer still in hand. "Then why are you here, Colton? To watch me fail, to offer platitudes about new beginnings somewhere else?" "Garrett came to see me yesterday," he said, watching her expression change from defiance to concern. "He's not just after your store, he wants the broken arrow too." "What? Why would he?" "He's consolidating," Colton explained. "Wants to build some kind of empire here, but that's not important right now. What matters is that he threatened you, Zara, said he'd ruin your reputation if I didn't sell." Zara paled, the hammer dropping to her side. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing yet. But I've made my decision." He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "I'm selling him the broken arrow." "You can't," she protested immediately. "That ranch is everything to you. You've built it from nothing. You can't give it up because of me." "I can," he countered, "and I will. But I have conditions for Garrett. In exchange for the broken arrow, he cancels your debt and signs the mercantile over to you, free and clear." Tears welled in Zara's eyes. "I won't let you do this, Colton. I won't be the reason you lose your dream." "Maybe dreams change," he said quietly. "Maybe what I thought I wanted isn't what I need after all." The words hung between them, laden with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge fully. Zara stepped closer, close enough that he could see the golden flecks in her green eyes, could count each tear clinging to her lashes. "There has to be another way," she insisted. "We could fight him together, take this to the territorial court." "Surely what he's doing can't be legal." "Courts take time we don't have," Colton replied. "And Garrett has money, connections we don't." "Then I'll leave," she said suddenly. "I'll go to Helena or further, start over." "He'll have no reason to pressure you then." The thought of her leaving created such immediate, visceral pain that Colton reached for her hand without thinking. "No, that's not an option." "Why not?" she challenged, though she made no move to withdraw her hand from his. "Why should you sacrifice everything when I could simply walk away?" Colton struggled to find words for feelings he had denied for so long. "Because the broken arrow is just land, Zara. It's trees and grass and cattle. It can be replaced, but you," he faltered, then pressed on, "you can't be replaced, not to me." The admission, imperfect as it was, hung between them like a lifeline neither was certain they should grasp. Zara looked down at their joined hands, then back to his face. "There's something you should know before you do anything rash," she said finally. "Something I learned this morning. Garrett doesn't own my note legally. He arranged with the banker in Helena to buy it, but the transfer documents were never properly filed. Jonathan Wells confirmed it when I asked him to look into the matter." Hope flickered in Colton's chest. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means we have time," she explained. "Time to gather evidence of what Garrett's doing, time to contact the territorial judge, time to rally the other business owners he's pressuring. We don't have to choose between your ranch and my store." Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by something else. Admiration for her resourcefulness, her refusal to surrender without exploring every avenue. "You're an extraordinary woman, Zara Kincaid," he said, a smile breaking across his face. "And you," she replied, her own smile dawning, "are a man too quick to sacrifice himself for others, Colton Lawson. A trait I find both infuriating and..." And, he prompted when she hesitated. And wonderful, she finished softly. They might have continued this fragile exploration of feelings had the moment not been interrupted by Sheriff Rogers calling Colton's name from across the street. The urgency in his voice had them both turning. "Fire at the Broken Arrow," the sheriff announced breathlessly. "Jenkins rode in to report it, said the ranch house is already half gone." Colton's world narrowed to a single point of horrified understanding. "Garrett," he said, the name a curse. "He's making sure I have no choice but to sell." Without another word, he swung onto his horse, but before he could spur the animal into motion, Zara called out, "Wait. I'm coming with you." "It's too dangerous," he protested, even as she was already running toward the livery stable. "I'll be right behind you," she called back, disappearing into the building. Torn between the urgent need to reach his property and unwillingness to leave her behind, Colton waited the agonizing minutes until she emerged on a swift bay mare. Together they rode hard for the Broken Arrow, the sheriff and a hastily assembled group of townsmen following behind. The scene that greeted them confirmed their worst fears. The ranch house, Colton's home for 5 years, was engulfed in flames that reached hungrily toward the clear autumn sky. Nearby outbuildings had also been set ablaze, the smoke creating a pall over the entire property. "The cattle," Colton muttered, immediately veering toward the main corral where his prized breeding stock was kept. To his relief, the corral was untouched, the cattle agitated but unharmed. The fire had been set with deliberate precision to destroy his home while leaving the property's value intact. As the townsmen worked to contain the flames, Zara spotted movement near the tree line, 3 riders watching the destruction from a distance. "Colton," she called, pointing. "Look there." Garrett and his men come to witness the fruition of their plan. Without hesitation, Colton urged his horse toward them, rage and grief fueling his reckless charge. Zara followed, fear for him overriding caution. Seeing them approach, Garrett's men drew their weapons, but the land speculator himself raised a hand, stopping them. His face showed no guilt, only calculated interest as Colton reined to a stop before him. "A terrible accident," Garrett observed with mock sympathy. "Frontier life is so precarious. One moment you have a home, the next." He gestured toward the burning buildings. "Well, my offer still stands. Though given the circumstances, I'll have to reduce it somewhat." "You're a dead man," Colton stated flatly, his hand moving to his sidearm. "I wouldn't," one of Garrett's men warned, his own gun already trained on Colton. "Mister. Garrett has powerful friends who would ensure you hang if anything happened to him." "And what about witnesses?" Zara's voice cut through the tension as she guided her horse to Colton's side. "What happens when people learn you set this fire to force Colton to sell?" Garrett's smug expression faltered slightly. "You have no proof of that, Mrs. Kincaid." "Don't I?" She reached into her saddlebag and withdrew a folded document. "This sworn statement from Jonathan Wells details your attempt to bribe him into illegally transferring my store to you. It also mentions your boast about how you plan to acquire the Broken Arrow by any means necessary." It was a bluff, the document was simply the mercantile's deed, but uncertainty flashed across Garrett's face. "The territorial judge arrives tomorrow for circuit court," she continued confidently. "I'm sure he'll be very interested in hearing about your business practices, especially when backed by statements from other property owners you've threatened." Colton, catching on to her strategy, added, "And I wonder what the sheriff will find when he examines the origin points of these fires." "Men like you always leave evidence, Garrett." For the first time, genuine concern showed in the speculator's expression. His eyes darted between them, calculating odds and outcomes. "You're bluffing," he finally declared, though with less certainty than before. "Are we?" Colton challenged. "Care to wager your future on that? Because I promise you this, even if I hang for it, you won't leave this territory alive if you don't ride away now and never return." The threat, delivered with such cold conviction, seemed to finally penetrate Garrett's confidence. After a long moment, he nodded to his men. "This backwater isn't worth the trouble. Helena has more promising opportunities anyway." As Garrett turned his horse to leave, Zara called after him, "Your documents claiming ownership of my note will be waiting for you at the sheriff's office. I suggest you sign them back to the bank before departing, unless you'd like the judge to issue a warrant for attempted fraud." The speculator's shoulders stiffened, but he didn't respond, spurring his horse into a trot that quickly became a gallop, his men close behind. Only when they had disappeared from sight did Colton release the breath he'd been holding, turning to Zara with newfound respect. That was either the bravest or most foolhardy bluff I've ever witnessed. Who says it was entirely a bluff? She replied with a small smile. Jonathan Wells did examine my note this morning, and he was quite disturbed by what he found. And the judge really does arrive tomorrow. Colton shook his head in wonder. Remind me never to play poker with you. Their momentary triumph faded as they turned back toward the ranch. The main house was beyond saving, though the townsmen had managed to protect most of the outbuildings. 5 years of work of building and planning reduced to ash and smoldering timber. I'm so sorry, Colton, Zara said softly, reaching for his hand as they surveyed the destruction. To her surprise, his expression held more resolve than defeat. It's just a house, he said after a moment. The land is still here. The cattle are safe, I can rebuild. Yes, you can, she agreed, squeezing his hand. And you won't be doing it alone. The words held more promise than either had yet dared voice aloud. As they stood amid the ruins of what had been, something new and unspoken began to take shape between them, an understanding that transcended the careful friendship they had maintained. The following weeks saw the town of Pine Ridge rally around one of their own in a way Colton had never expected. Men appeared with lumber and tools, helping to clear away debris and begin construction on a new ranch house before winter set in. Women brought food and supplies, transforming the work into community gatherings that gradually drew Colton out of the solitary existence he had maintained for so long. At the center of it all was Zara, who closed her store early each day to ride out to the Broken Arrow, organizing efforts, keeping records, ensuring that volunteers were fed and materials properly used. Her natural leadership abilities, previously confined to her mercantile, flourished in this new challenge. The townsfolk who had long respected her now looked to her with something approaching awe. You know what they're saying in town now, don't you? Sheriff Rogers commented to Colton one evening as they surveyed the progress on the new house's framework. People always talk, Colton replied, unconsciously echoing Zara's words from months earlier. They're saying you two are rebuilding more than just a house out here, the sheriff continued undeterred. Saying maybe the most stubborn widow and the most solitary rancher in the territory have finally met their matches. Colton's gaze drifted to where Zara stood with Mrs. Jenkins reviewing plans for the kitchen layout, her golden hair catching the late afternoon sunlight. Would that be so terrible? He asked quietly. The sheriff clapped him on the shoulder. It might be the best damn thing that's happened in this town in years. As autumn deepened toward winter, the new ranch house took shape, larger than the original, with a wide front porch and additional rooms that no one directly mentioned were more than a single man would need. The first snow fell the night they completed the roof, as if nature had granted them just enough time. That evening, after the last of the workers had departed, Colton and Zara stood alone in what would become the main room, a small fire burning in the newly constructed hearth. Outside, snow continued to fall, insulating the world in pristine white. I can't thank you enough, Colton said, breaking the comfortable silence. Without your help, I'd still be sleeping in the stable. Zara smiled, her face illuminated by firelight. I think the entire town deserves your thanks. They've grown quite fond of you, despite your best efforts to keep them at a distance. Not all of them, he corrected gently. Just one in particular. Her eyes widened slightly at his words, at the unmistakable intent behind them. Colton, I've been thinking, he interrupted, suddenly afraid his courage might fail if he didn't speak now. About what Garrett said, about what everyone says. Which part, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. About us. About how stubborn we both are. He took a step closer to her, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. They said we were both too stubborn to wed, that we'd both choose loneliness over risking our hearts again. People always talk, she repeated, though her voice trembled slightly. Yes, they do, he agreed, but sometimes what they're saying might contain a grain of truth. I was stubborn. I did choose isolation because it felt safer until I met you. Zara's breath caught as he took another step toward her. What changed? She asked. Everything, he answered simply. You made me remember that there are things worth risking everything for, that a home isn't just walls and a roof, it's the people who share it with you. He reached for her hand, entwining their fingers in a gesture that had become familiar over these months of shared work and growing feelings. I rebuilt this house larger than it was before. Added rooms I don't need, a kitchen bigger than any bachelor requires, a front porch wide enough for 2 rocking chairs. I noticed, she admitted with a small smile. I built it for a future I hope includes you, Zara, he continued, his voice deep with emotion he no longer tried to hide. Not because I need someone to cook or keep house, not because I'm afraid to be alone, but because when I imagine any tomorrow worth having, you're in it. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were accompanied by a smile that transformed her entire face. The townspeople will be insufferable if you keep talking like this, she warned, even as she stepped closer to him. Let them talk, he murmured, his free hand gently cupping her cheek. For once, they'll be right about something. The stubborn widow and the solitary cowboy, finding in each other what they both claimed they didn't want or need. And what is that? She asked, her eyes never leaving his. A second chance, he answered, a partner. A love worth rebuilding everything for. The word hung between them, no longer too frightening to acknowledge. Zara's hand came to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. I never thought I would feel this way again, she confessed. After Michael died, I convinced myself that love was something I'd experienced once and lost forever. That independence was safer than vulnerability. And now, Colton asked, hope evident in his voice. Now I understand that real strength isn't in standing alone, she replied. It's in choosing to stand beside someone even knowing how much it would hurt to lose them. Their first kiss was gentle, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened into something more profound, an acknowledgement of all they had become to each other, all they hoped to be. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, the fire's glow seemed to encompass more than just the hearth, warming the entire house with possibility. Marry me, Colton said, the words more statement than question. Not because you need protection or security, not because I need someone to make this house a home, but because together, we're more than either of us could be alone. Yes, she answered without hesitation. Yes to building something neither of us thought possible again. Yes to proving everyone wrong about how stubborn we are. He laughed, lifting her off her feet in a moment of uncharacteristic exuberance. They'll never believe it in town. The two most determined solitary souls in the territory, planning a wedding. Let them talk, she echoed his earlier words, her arms around his neck as he set her gently back on her feet. For once, I don't mind being the subject of gossip.